Welcome to the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Together we explore the vast landscapes of life, delving into the rich soil of experiences, sowing the seeds of curiosity, and harvesting the profound wisdom that each episode unfolds. Welcome to Harvesting Wisdom podcast. I'm your host, Mike McMahon. Today I have Ed Williams with me. And Ed, I got to tell you, we don't see each other for 6 months in a whack or whatever, or a year at times. And I always think of you as Ed LEAR for the LEHR Garden, right? And then I'm like always surprised it's Ed Williams. So
yeah, I don't name things after myself.
Well, thanks for coming here today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having
Ed,
me.
you are the inventor and prototype builder of the LEHR Garden. So if your name is not LEAR, that means that's some kind of an acronym. So what does LEHR Garden stand for?
It's both an acronym and not an acronym.
Okay.
LEAR is a German root word that means to learn or to teach. And that aspect is part of the DNA. So LEHR is teacher, LEHRling would be apprentice. And so that piece is as we teach people how to garden and teach people how to make soil. That's part of the DNA from the very beginning. But as an acronym, it stands for linking ecosystem and hardware for regeneration. So beautiful. The idea is that as most people have come up with new versions of agriculture, they typically either say ecosystem is where it's at, we're going to get rid of the technology, or technology where it's at, we need to get rid of the ecosystem. Yeah. And what a LEAR garden do is we're saying the ecosystem and the hardware, and we're going to link them together. We're going to make them work together. So instead of using the technology to replace the ecosystem, we're using the technology to enhance and accelerate the ecosystem, but replacing a lot of the human labor.
Sure. And so you have hardware is a perfect way to explain it. You know, the garden system that we have is not hardware at all, and it's I like to say get rid of the furniture. You know, so put your money into the thing, but it's a different approach. And so I went to your garden, and we'll show clips of that here today, and we'll get into that in a minute. But I got to ask first, okay, what's your background, and why are you doing that? Well, how did you get into this? What motivated you to start? More importantly, what motivates you to keep going?
I think, one of the things that you ever ask yourself a question and find out that the answer to that question changed your whole life? When I was about 12, I loved animals. I had a bunch of pets, and I'm sitting there grumbling because I got to clean out my terrarium. And if a lizard goes and makes a mess in the forest, nobody ever cleans up after it. Why do I have to? Who can do this that isn't me? And so started my journey of like, okay, well, let me create a natural terrarium where I have plants, and I never ever had to clean a terrarium after that. Once I created an appropriate ecosystem, and then as I grew and learned, I started having more and more complicated. I started learning about soil organisms and mushrooms and fungus and how all of the different ecosystem pieces fit together. Professionally, I'm a civil engineer. So I went to Georgia Tech and got my degree in civil engineering, and had a very good career doing that. And from my standpoint, I'm looking at those engineering skills and saying the functions that you get out of an ecosystem, you can engineer with that. Yeah. Well, there's things that it do.
The hardware, that explains the hardware.
Yeah. And so
simple as that.
So it's something that I brought those. I was used to say that my profession is civil engineering, but my hobby is ecological engineering. Okay. And I just found a way to take that hobby and turn it more into.
And so when did you start doing you probably started many different versions of it, but when did you come up with this basic concept and start commercializing it? I guess that's what that is.
The first version of it was back in 2012. I moved to Phoenix and realized my first apartment, I just was a studio. I didn't have a yard. But in 2013, I got a yard, and I said, okay, I was very fascinated with aquaponics at the time, right, but I'm a soil guy. I'm a soil nerd, and I think living soil is one of the most important substances on the planet.
Of course.
And I think that, I realized that in Phoenix, we have true 12-month gardening. We can grow something every single month out of the year. But if you want to survive through the summer, then you've got to have something, an automated system. Because I know myself, I have ADHD, and I know that I'm going to be out there every day for 3 weeks watering my garden, and then I'm going to forget about it, and I'm going to come back a week later, and everything's dead. You're starting over again before you harvested anything. So I wanted to automate it and get something that was going to do a pretty good job of taking care of itself. And of course, with that ecological background, I wanted to use the ecology as part of the automation, thus the linking ecosystem and hardware.
Right.
So basically kind of pulling those pieces together. So I'm using the hardware to manage the flow of water. I'm using the ecosystem to create fertility, buffer nutrients, manage fertility, create the pH. All of that's done by the living systems in the garden.
Yeah, and I gotta say, when I first saw your system, I thought, oh my God, you're crazy, but it's which is probably true too, but
probably is.
But the system itself, I was like, oh my God, look at this apparatus. So everybody approaches a little differently. Your approach is definitely different. I saw it as like, oh my, I think that's, and tell me if you're wrong. I think it's a more complicated garden, but it has more to offer from a standpoint of teaching people. And it's complicated because it's got a lot on. It's like a Rube Goldberg invention, and it's like there's so many parts.
It's a fully engineered system. There's a lot to it. Yeah.
And I look at it and say there's a lot of cost and expense, and it takes up a lot of space for small square footage. So for me, it was about what can I do on the cheap, more square footage to grow more stuff. But the reality is you really are an ecosystem specialist.
Yes.
You can't do your garden without being a little bit of a geek. So the average person, if you want to really learn agriculture fast, your garden will be a good way, but you got to stick with it. You got to.
But it's also good for people. It's designed to be a garden that's easy to use. So there's a lot of parts there. One of the things that I run into quite a bit is people will look at it and, they say that the engineering process isn't done when you've added everything that needs to be added. It's done when you've taken away everything that needs to be taken away.
Your garden, just like outside, is an evolving ecosystem.
Yeah, exactly.
It's better later than it is at first.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the deal.
Then, it's one of the things that's really weird about it is when I put the soil, I don't put soil into the garden. I put wood chips into the garden. I've got a couple of amendments, but it's about 95% wood chips, food waste when I can get it.
Right.
And then, if you've talked to just about any landscaper, they're going to tell you, and I suppose I could just ask you, can you plant directly in wood chips and expect your plants to thrive?
I think ornamentals are almost completely wood chips, right? So nurseries. And we have a fortified wood chip, and it's got a little bit of nutrient value in it. But it depends. We actually have 3 different types. So when you're first starting to grow seed, you don't want anything hot. You don't want a lot of nutrient. The seed has a nutrient in it until it pops up and does its thing for a couple of weeks. And then you can add the next one we have is for transplants, which is a tiny bit of nutrient base in it. And then the third phase is actually our product that will grow that plant out, and you can shift with it and that kind of thing. And from there, you can put it, depending on what environment you're putting it, you can put it into a grow bags type of scenario, or you can put it in the ground at your house, maybe amend it or whatever. But there's that, the cycle of a plant. You can't, we all want something fast and instant, like going to Safeway and picking up our grocery, right? I mean, that's it. But the reality is plants have a cycle, all of them do. And that cycle, it's always, there's always nutrient cycling going on. And your garden had, so I looked at it and I was, first of all, I do more traditional composting. So I look at it saying, okay, there's no thermophilic process here.
No.
You're going to have pathogens all over the place.
No.
And then I'm looking at it saying, you're not really adding too much to it. You do add to it. But what you're doing is you're growing the microbes
and what
as you speak.
has shifted over the years.
Yeah, we'll get into that in a second. But the bottom line is nature like doesn't really need man's help other
No, it
than to
doesn't.
just get the hell out of the way.
Yeah,
And so what you're doing is you're really trying to do biomimicry.
exactly.
And that's a little scary for the average person who just wants to grow
I kind of like bioutilization better.
Okay.
Because mimicry, we're trying to create something in our lab that mimics what they're doing in nature. I'm actually using nature. I'm not mimicking it. I'm using it.
Okay. That's a nice way to look at it. So when I looked at it, I was like, no way. I'm looking at what you're doing, and I'm like, this is not. And it was, for me, it was like, because I came from a different aspect of looking at what we're doing. And then I did a soil test on it. Turns out the soil was superb.
Yeah.
It was amazing. And there were no pathogens. There were no heavy metals. There was nothing in it. You can't compost out a heavy metal anyway.
Yeah.
But you just didn't have the pathogens in there.
But we do have isopods.
Okay.
They do very well in there. An isopod, if it consumes a heavy metal, it changes the heavy metal into a non-biologically available
It breaks
form
it down.
in its
Sure.
stomach. Yeah.
And that's
So
your
it
fungi.
binds it away.
That's your
Yeah.
fungus in action, right? So
That does it too. Yeah. The mycorrhizal fungus it's creating the glomalin. Are you
Right.
familiar with glomalin?
Yeah.
Yeah. So as it's creating the glomalin, it'll actually it'll bind the heavy metals
right,
into
it
the
just
glomalin and
separates
lock
it
them
out.
away.
and-
Yeah.
Right. So it is an interesting garden type, but I was, I got to say to anybody who's questioning it, I analyzed it and I questioned it. So,
Yeah.
and it works. So,
And honestly, I appreciate that level of checking me out. you know.
I'm looking. I'm a skeptic. I'm not I'm not a cynic, but I am a skeptic until proven proven otherwise.
I will tell you,
everyone is guilty.
One of the things that I've seen in this industry, especially trying to find new ways of performing agriculture, when you have a new opportunity, people say, okay, we need to find better ways. The charlatans move in first because they can move fast because they don't need any
Snake oil
proof.
salesman.
Yeah, exactly. And so they're going to come up with all these pie in the sky. Hey, you're going to produce so much of this and so much of that, and by the time the proof rolls around 3 or 4 years later, they're off into the wind, having made their millions of dollars. But then it's the engineers who come in after and say, well, okay, we know how to fix this.
Yeah.
But that doesn't happen without the skeptics who come to, no, this doesn't make any sense. We're going to test it.
Right.
How'd the test go? Oh, okay. Well, if the tests are good, cool. We're doing all right.
Yeah.
If the tests aren't good, okay, how do we fix that? How do we account for that?
So I was probably at your facility and looked at your gardens as you were building them. I don't know how, I always think it was like a month ago. It was probably 2 years ago, 3 years
It
ago.
was probably about 2 years ago.
Okay. So tell me how, because I've got clips of that and I'll show some of that, but how has it evolved? What, from a hardware standpoint and or from a creation of soils standpoint?
So the very first LEAR garden that I built back in 2013 looks absolutely nothing like what I'm building now. It was I got a tray, it was 6 inches deep and it was 4 foot by 8 foot, and I put it up on a big table and cycled the water through, and it was pretty ugly, but it was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then I moved to Tempe back 7, 8 years ago, something like that. And I built the beginnings of the one that I do now. And I was planning on building. I had like four different beds planned out, and I was going to do a different design on each one. And the first one that I built had some kind of specific functionality that I was looking at. It ended up being so popular that's the one that I stuck with. What I've done in terms of, the basic design is still recognizable from that original one. What I've done is I've added some trim and some other pieces just to make it attractive.
Aesthetics. It is amazing how people, we do the Ready Go Garden bag system, and people will complain that it's in a plastic bag, and they don't think it's aesthetic. It's a white plastic bag, which I think is great. In Arizona, it's reflective. You can paint it black if you want to in a colder area, but you can put it, put a box around it or whatever you want to do. But bottom line is you don't need expensive furniture to go with it. It just grows, So to me, that was my deal. But there's people and then I get people who are not environmentalists at all telling me how it's not environmentally, sound. And the idea is plastic is part of our life, just like oil. And we want to all blame the oil industry for, everything, right? But the reality is we are the oil industry. There's not a thing in this room that wasn't oil-based. There's nothing we eat that wasn't, grown or helped grow with oil. We don't go from point A to point B without oil. Half of our clothes are synthetic. It's part of our life, right? And plastics are byproduct of oil. So
I use a pond liner on the inside of my beds to protect the wood.
But the deal is what we're talking about is the difference between a single-use plastic, right?
That's it.
And the fact that we don't value as a society separation of our waste. If we separated, even that single waste plastic could be easily recycled and reused. But the fact that it's mixed in with everything else in your house makes it near impossible to recycle it. So our big thing is not to condemn these manufacturers and that industry per se. Now, single-use plastics, I do think that we're better off with aluminum or something that's a little better, or figuring out a way to source separate.
Or just reuse.
But our plastic bag is good we've had some of our plastic bags go 8 years. So to me, that's usable. And the reason we have to get rid of it is it's disintegrating, which is exactly what we're talking about, which is, it's biodegrading. And so it can be taken and you can shred it and into a point where it's not, putting out any kind of dangerous PCBs.
They're finding fungus that'll decompose.
Oh, yeah, of course they have that. So I think goes with that.
I'm excited to see where that goes.
Yeah, well, that's another part of, we just have to have the will to go there, right? But it is interesting how the aesthetics of something, which you're an engineer, I have a background in engineering too, and it's, we don't necessarily think of what difference does it make? It's how it works.
I make something.
Does it function?
It's boxy and it works.
And the cool thing, I think the really cool thing for people who are listening to this is you have for the geeks out there.
Yeah.
So if you think of yourself as an environmentalist, and everybody thinks they are, and meanwhile they're getting in jets and they've got fast fashion going on in their house, and they've got a 6,000 square foot house with a family of 3 or something, and they're worried about some little element, right? But the deal is that if you fancy yourself like an environmentalist, or you want to teach your kids how to do something, but you got to be a little bit of a geek, I think your garden is the garden out there for that. And on top of it, it doesn't take up a lot of space.
It's very productive in a small space.
The only downside is that it's not gonna, because of its square footage, you're not growing a lot of crops for a big family. However, that's not truly true, right? Because your soil can be rotated out and put in as an amendment in the ground.
And I think certainly for people who are doing a lot of in-ground gardening, if you wanted to get a LEAR garden, the soil that comes out of a LEAR garden
it's great.
It's fantastic. Yeah.
Right.
And the more testing that I do, the more there's a ton of science that needs to be done. It's a completely unique product. Yeah. To my knowledge, it's the only compost that we've ever created that was created under the roots of living plants.
Yeah.
And plants change the soil.
And you've done things like you've taken the rooftop systems to feed, your garden, or partially feed your garden. You've got some bizarre Rucober style things going on.
Yeah, when you came and visited me, I had rainwater harvest.
But you can still do that. You can do that if that's what you want.
That house, the rainwater, I was getting about 3/4 of the roof down to one gutter, and I ran 6 garden beds off of a combination of the condensate off of the AC and the rainwater for 9 months.
And I looked at it saying, man, you got asphalt roof tile, you got all kinds of stuff. You got to have some toxins, some tar, whatever. No toxins came out when I did the test. So it didn't really take place. And if you had a metal roof, for sure,
that'd be even better.
It'd slide through, depending on the metal coatings and everything else. Yeah. But so your garden is really set in place. And you're right. If you had because you're generating soil as you're going. Yeah. As a matter of fact, rotating it out is good for your bed, and it's actually good
Yeah.
for the soil you put it in. Because what we're talking about doing is you're raising microbes, right? I mean, that's at the end of the day, it's the same thing we do when we compost or we vermicompost. Okay, so tell me what you're putting in there now. You put everything under the sun into this thing, and you've tested it all. So what is the most effective thing now?
The testing, I think, has been, it definitely provides guidance. So when I first started putting it in there, I'm thinking, okay, I need micronutrients until the wood can give them up. So I was putting in azomite, I was putting in rock phosphate, I was putting in green sand. And
minerality going on. Okay.
Just to make sure that I've got the minerals that we need. But I don't want something that's gonna dump a bunch of like easily soluble. I wanted the rock
Breaking
products.
down over time. Yeah.
And so what happened was I had a pond testing kit, and every single time I've ever tested the phosphorus from that little test kit, then the water's off the charts. So I quit adding phosphorus altogether. It's never had a shortage of phosphorus.
Yeah.
The azomite, I took one of the tests, and I've had several of those compost tests. One of the ones that you guys sent me, and then I've had several, and they all actually come out pretty much in the same range. There's obviously variability, but they're pretty close. And what I found was that I started comparing and like, okay, I want to find ranges. Where am I at in these ranges? And the only one that's really significantly low is pretty much always low on potassium. Which is weird because potash is where you get the name potassium. You'd think there'd be plenty of it in wood, but it's not really coming through.
Right.
So I'm kind of working on fixing that.
Have you been using any biochar at all or anything?
Yeah, I'm using biochar. I'll get to biochar in just a second.
Okay.
But if I started analyzing, like there's ranges for all of the macronutrients, but then when you get to the micronutrients, I couldn't find a range. So I said, well, let me just compare it to what's in azomite. And what I found is that for about 2/3 of the nutrients, my output that's coming out of my system is higher in nutrients than azomite. So why would I add azomite? Because I'm
for other reasons, but yeah, but not from a nutrient standpoint.
But not from a nutrient standpoint.
We do have I think we call it carbo load. It's our blend of it's potash, not completely potash, but it is. We call it carbo load because and it's an autumn. We put it in the autumn, which is something that hardens roots, and it's a great additive to ornamentals as well as vegetables. But maybe I'll give you a bag and you can play with putting some of that, and you probably don't need that much to adjust what you got. But okay, so what else?
So
I know you were
biochar.
You were doing worms.
So biochar, we definitely do earthworms. So the biochar, what I found is that the biochar is really good for, it does a couple of things. The first thing is that it's going to be really good for buffering the nutrients. So one of the problems that you run into when you're trying to grow in compost is you get these peaks and valleys as the compost is breaking down, even with wood chips. And the water flow is going to even those out a little bit. So if you get in a peak of something over here, but the same thing's over here, the water flow is going to kind of even them out a little bit. But then if you put the biochar in there, it's going to kind of suck up a lot of those nutrients.
You're putting it in raw. You're not really inoculating it, but
correct,
because you've got so much composting.
Fresher the better, yeah.
But they say sometimes that it's dangerous because it can suck all your nutrients out. But
I don't see that happening.
You've got such a complex blend of soil that I think it's inoculating that biochar almost instantaneously because your soil is wet, it's dark, it's black.
The other thing that's nice about it is that I'm inoculating right now at about 5% biochar, but the way it breaks down, running through the calculations, the final product is more like 25%.
That's crazy because it doesn't break down.
Because it doesn't break down, and everything else is breaking down. And your microbes, sifting it out.
Your microbes have a little condominium to live.
And it's fully charged biochar. Okay. So it's improving the final product, but it's also sort of buffering the system in the meantime.
Right. And then you said you're putting in worms still a little bit.
Yeah, we're definitely. Well, we put in worms, and the worms grow like crazy.
Oh yeah,
they go. Yeah,
geometric progression on that. Right?
They double their population every 90 days, and so I've been in kind of in a growth phase the last several years, but I'd like to get to a point where we're producing earthworms. We've talked to a couple of nurseries about. I was talking to one of the local nurseries, and they're getting theirs from California, and I'm like, well,
you haven't been out to our facility, but we have
up in Yarnell,
yeah. So that we have like more earthworms than you could possibly use. So if you want earthworms,
Yeah.
you can
Oh,
start, but you can produce your own.
I do.
You just
yeah.
have a screening process. So let's see, okay, it takes how long for that system to start? You're almost starting immediately.
Yeah.
But
So
have you figured out, because, we talk about an ecosystem.
Yeah.
So it's not just the soil itself, but it's not just the microbes. It's also the plants that you're growing, right?
It's the plants, and what I'll do is, and kind of could circle back just a little bit to where the process has gone, and in terms of how I build it, and what I've really been focusing on the last couple of years is more the process engineering, and I've gotten it down to the where it takes me, the gardens that I put in for, say, the Phoenix Backyard Garden Program, takes me about 3 to 4 hours to build one of those garden beds, and then about 2 to install it, and by the time we're done
You're installing it in 2. That's good.
Yeah, so we install it, we set it up, we add the starter soil, and then help them plant. And so we're planting same day,
Okay.
With both seeds and
Once it's moist
transplants.
enough, you got to soak it in.
Yeah, we got to get it soaked up, and I don't even have to soak it that much. The stuff that I bring in usually is pretty dry, just because it's really heavy when it's not. But we'll dump that in there. We'll get the sprayers running on it. We'll go ahead and put the plants in.
So you're pre-mixing the soil, the starter soil at your facility?
No, I just take.
You're taking the ingredients?
Tubs of wood chips right out of chip drop.
Okay.
Or actually,
you're bringing in the
APS
biochar, you're bringing in some worms, you're bringing in a few other ingredients.
Correct. Yeah,
right?
and I'll just build it up in layers.
Oh, okay.
And so I'll put a layer of wood chips, and then a layer of biochar, and then to help the potassium, I'll add a little bit of wood ash and some langbeinite, a little more biochar.
I forgot you were layering. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and then we put about an inch of finished compost, and so the finished compost, when I sift the soil, I got 2 sieves, and I get 3 products out of that. So there's the fines, which is what we take out and sell as this LEAR soil amplifier.
Right.
Then we've got the middle grade stuff. That's what we put on top of the garden. And then the stuff that's still wood chips just goes back in as wood chips.
Yeah.
But that
and
top
the way you've
layer,
got it layered is important because everything drains. So your nutrients dropping down.
Correct.
And it's working with the wood chips.
And so we start off with a sprayer that's going to top water it and kind of get everything watered down. But once the plants get established, we turn off the sprayers, and the water, it's the flood and drain system through the garden.
Have you noticed, I'm going to ask a couple questions more on the garden itself, but have you noticed certain plants grow better?
Yes.
They have more success with some and not with others. Which ones are you having great success with, and which ones do you struggle with? And sometimes gardens, no matter what, you struggle.
Oh, yeah. And I think
garden beds.
One of the things that I haven't really had the time to dig into, like, really the nutrient profile, I think a lot of the ones that I've been struggling with are ones that probably need more potassium. And so like peppers, for example.
A lot of acidity sometimes.
I get too much acidity. That's why I do wood ash to try and bring some. The first time I got the first soil test
I can't remember the soil test. What did we come up with? Was it a?
I think the one that you took was. I think in that case I had overcorrected. My very first one, my pH came out at 3.6.
Oh man, okay, well,
which is
grow blueberries in there.
Yeah, no, blueberries still wanted at 5.
Wow, yeah.
So that's significantly below even blueberries, and it was still growing pretty well.
Tobacco? I don't know. I'm trying to think.
Yeah, it was. There's not. I mean, it was weird that it was growing at that. So I started adding wood ash and oyster shell. Stuff like that to try and bring it up. And I think I overdid it a little bit because I think the one that you took and tested was more like 8.
Too much calcium, maybe.
Something like that. Yeah. So I think we've got it. I add a little bit of wood ash now, but I've stopped adding the oyster shell.
Yeah, it's funny because if you go to California or the East Coast or Midwest, some places they're growing in a 5.5 pH, 6. They think anything more than that would be crazy, right?
Yeah.
We here are growing pretty much in a 8 soil or whatever,
8.6.
But there's different dynamics to the soil structure as well. So but let's talk how long do you leave that soil in play? How many crops cycles?
Typically you get about 2 seasons out of it. So you can
go for
harvest
almost
the
a
soil.
year, almost.
Yeah. So what happens is at 6 months you can harvest the soil at 6 months. You have to harvest it by the time it hits a year. So our seasons here, we get 3 4-month seasons in Phoenix, and So if you get basically 2 seasons out of it, 8, 9 months, then pull the soil out, that seems to be about right. But by the time you get to a year, what's happened is those fine particulates are the soil is shrinking, it's compacting,
Right.
and all of the pore spaces get filled up with those fine particulates. And
So your soil structure over time, because you're composting so well.
it just it doesn't allow the water to flow through,
Got it.
and it goes anaerobic.
Yeah.
So
And
that's the point where we really have to reset it.
to bring it in, and your byproduct, of course, is a great soil. So for the person who wants to learn about ecosystems and about the microbes and that kind of thing, you've got the great product. But on top of it, you're generating enough soil. So and what I've learned when in Africa and the projects we're on is that we try to take on too much.
Yeah.
You know, here's 20 acres here and 5 acres here, and let's grow this and let's grow that. Where we've had our most success is doing a strip garden that might be 100 feet long, and the kids will do all kinds of different things, larvae that they're putting in, and worms, and we're regenerating soils. We're growing a good combination of crops, and then we start growing an overstory. Banana or citrus and that kind of thing. And when that starts to dominate, we start reducing some of the annuals underneath, and we try to have perennials. And what happens is when we leave that section, because we got plenty of land, we go to the next 100-foot strip, and then the section we leave is really regenerative. And that's what we're talking about. What you're creating is regenerative if you're removing the soil.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
I had one of my favorite things. I was working at I had a booth at the farmers market. This was a couple of years ago, and I love it when people come at me with good questions. It means they're really engaged.
Well, it makes you think. Okay.
Makes me think too.
I gotta get an answer.
If I've got a hole, I want to find it. Right. I'm not the guy who wants to be right all the time. I'm the guy who wants to make it right. And so a person came to me and she had a really, really good question. She said, okay, you're saying that this is a regenerative agriculture. And I said, yes. And she said, it's a raised bed garden. Regenerative agriculture happens in the soil. How can you call this regenerative agriculture? And I said, I love you for this question. I said, let me ask you something. How important would you say it is to have a compost bin in a regenerative operation? She goes, oh, it's absolutely critical. You can't call yourself regenerative if you're not composting. So this is the world's fanciest.
At least to start.
Yeah.
At least to
start. This is the world's fanciest compost bin.
Yeah.
It isn't meant to have the soil held here. We're just going to make some of the best soil possible, and then we're going to remove it, and we're going to put it somewhere else where it needs to go.
It's a component of regeneration because to truly be completely regenerative, you've got crops that can grow in the soil without humans, right? So the soil has to be able to retain enough moisture and enough energy to grow that particular crop, and that has to be a crop that can then survive in that soil.
But it also the piece that makes soil topsoil is the stable soil carbon, and more than anything, it creates soil structure. Right. And that's where like a third of that stable soil carbon is a compound.
And it's part of the plants that you're growing as well. Okay. Yeah. Last question, series of questions, just a question. I don't know. Depends on how you answer. The feedback now on your gardens. And so some people, like any garden, some people just don't want to do any work, right? They think the idea is a great idea. They put it in and then they're like, whatever, basically, I think there's a level, if anybody wants one of your gardens, there's a higher level of interest in learning anyway, right?
Yeah.
It is a LEAR garden.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's a learning garden. Yeah. So what kind of feedback are you getting, and how have you adjusted to that feedback from people, all things considered? Because you're always going to have somebody who never wanted to do the work. They didn't realize they'd have to be outside when it was 100 degrees.
I would say for the most part, I think one of the more amusing pieces of feedback, and I've gotten this from several people, is I'll tell people when I put it in their garden, they can expect to spend about an hour a month maintaining it. And I've gotten a couple of eye rolls on that. And then I've come back like 3 months later, and I've had this conversation with several people at this point, not just one or two. I say, okay, so when you put this in, you said an hour a month. And I said, yes. And I said, I assumed you were lying. And it turns out you were. But what I didn't realize is that you were exaggerating. Like, I'm not even spending an hour a month. You just look out the back door and go, yeah, it's still growing.
But they got to replant it, and they got
they've
to harvest it.
They've got to replant. I don't consider harvesting maintenance. That's
Okay.
why you grow the garden in the first place. That's the benefit.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's just a matter of kind of just looking at it, making sure everything's still working the way it's supposed to.
And so when you're working with them, you're giving them a kind of suggested list of plants.
Yeah.
And
If
because
I've got access to them,
what plant do you have a hard time growing?
Beans.
Yeah,
I was talking to a soil scientist, and he said was probably the reason that beans don't work is because the tap water comes in, it has water, it has salts, the water evaporates off, the salts stay. And so the salt levels climbs, and then the beans are super sensitive to salts. And so he says probably and we have, some of our tests have come out a little bit high on sodium and chlorine salts too.
We try to do like the Three Sisters and when we're in Africa because they grow that maize, that corn.
Yeah.
And so we grow a bean with it and a squash. And the squash does a lot to do a crop cover, and it allows for fermentation in the soil, so it's doing good.
Yeah.
And it's an extra crop to harvest, and because they're not machinery.
Fantastic.
The beans will grow, but we haven't been able to crop them out yet.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they're
might
fighting.
typically get about this tall.
Yeah. But I think they're doing
This is one that sometimes does well, but it doesn't tend to do excellent. I think that's a potassium issue.
But I think the bean, even though it's not growing to fruition, it is helping affix nitrogen during the process. So
I've had alfalfa. Alfalfa does fantastic.
Yeah, alfalfa is a great crop for Arizona.
Peas do
we don't
pretty
have
well
water anymore for it, so alfalfa farmers are going.
I've had it in my LEAR gardens. I ended up with some alfalfa seed, and I threw it in there, and
we can take over.
It does good. It does pretty good. Yeah. But peas do pretty well.
What's that?
Peas do well. They'll fix nitrogen too.
Yeah, they do good.
So yeah, I've got pretty good luck with those.
And so the feedback generally is they don't spend as much time as they thought. They enjoy it.
Yeah.
Are people taking? Would you say how much percentage of the people will, when it's time to rotate, they let you just take it because you take it and sell it? Or do they want to use it in their garden and expand?
Honestly, if they want to do it themselves, I've had a handful of people who wanted to reset it themselves. I had no problem teaching you how to reset your garden. That does not bother me. The problem that I actually have running into is that people don't want to bother me. And so I have to go and remember to go contact people. I haven't set up a good system for that, but I'm working on it.
Well, that's a great problem to have.
I know, right?
I have nothing but people who do want to bother me.
Yeah, but I kind of want them to bother me. It's like if this soil is time to reset.
Yeah,
then
because you want to know.
Yeah.
What do you think? The average garden, I think, goes 2 years before people get bored. They move. They blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
What are you seeing now? You've had gardens now.
I'm seeing,
quite a while.
at this point, the first gardens that we put in through the Phoenix Backyard Garden Program. So we put in 79 gardens in 79 backyards through that program.
Okay.
And there's probably 5 or 6 of them that I know. They moved, they got divorced, whatever life happened.
Sure.
But I also know, I had somebody come back to me about a month ago. She was moving to Maricopa, and could not bear to leave her garden behind. Paid me, I didn't pick it up my time, but she really wanted me to pick it up and move it for her. And I was like, it's hard to turn down somebody who's got that kind of loyalty. You want to take care of people. But for the most part, we've had a couple people when I come back and say, hey, can we take care of your garden? Well, you look at it, it's been sitting there with the water turned off and everything shut down for 6 months. Well, we'll tune it back up, get everything going, and start it back up, and it goes just fine.
So let's see. How do you visualize this scaling into the future? And or we work with students. Would you recommend students getting involved, and or would this be even a small business model for them, or is it just more of a labor of love? How do you see this thing?
Oh, I definitely see it scaling. So what we're trying to do is really trying to transform urban agriculture. trying to make it more sustainable, more easy. If you want to look at food security, local foods where you need to go. So if we can get, backyard gardens are nice. I want to move towards backyard farms. And that's really a lot of what we're doing up in Superior is I'm up in Superior now, and we're creating the eLocal network. And so we put in gardens and we're putting in larger gardens in Superior, and we put them in over 1% of the backyards in Superior already.
Yeah.
So the idea is to try and get that going. But then the compost, when we reset the gardens, the compost that we get out of that, we sift that and we turn around and sell it. And we're still working on generating markets.
I think the big advantage is the phase one is you can grow right in that thing and you can learn. Phase and you're growing a great active soil that can generate on its own. Phase two would be putting in planters and using this soil in the planters or growing in ground.
It also allows you to food forest.
That allows you to create a food forest or a food garden.
Yeah.
Because nobody wants to have 10 of these things sitting in their backyard. Even though
some
you're getting
people
more
will,
aesthetic.
But if you want to be a backyard farmer, then there's a advantage to that.
This is enough to add that that component into, because I've seen people growing straight in Arizona soil, and they're good. They grew up in Iowa or whatever, and they've grown some good stuff. Boy, if they had a little product that would help accelerate that or grow it,
and that's
plant.
Really that's why I call it the LEAR soil amplifier, is because it one of the bags we've still, like you said, there's a ton of science that still needs to be done, but what we're seeing is that I sell them in 1 gallon bags. It's enough for about 1,000 square feet. Right. And I'm hearing stories coming back from people. I had a woman whose roses were dying, and she comes back to me 3 months later, buys a second bag. She goes, "I've never seen my roses this healthy. Even the petals were thicker." Wow. I had a guy that had a fruit tree that he was very sentimental about, and this tree had been slowly dying over a couple of years. And he said he'd talked to like 3 different arborists and he'd been to like 6 different stores and tried every product, and nothing helped. And he came back to me and he said, "I dumped that bag on my tree." He goes, "It had new growth in like 2 days." Yeah. And he goes, "It bounced right back. It's a really healthy tree right now." Amazing. And so these are the kinds of the feedback that we're getting. And so, and one of the things that I'm seeing now is I've got a couple of friends who are into gardening. It's like, well, let's do a little bit of a test. And what I'm seeing is that people's gardens are weathering the summer heat easier.
And that's the big thing, right?
That's the big one, yeah.
Because the summer heat's getting worse and longer and everything else. But okay, so where do people go if they want to buy one of your systems or check it out? I see you go to the trade shows, maybe some of the farmer markets, but where do they?
The easy place is leargarden.com. That's LEHRGARDEN.com.
All right, great. Well, Ed, I appreciate you being here. I've got a bunch of
thanks for having
footage. Our paths cross all the time. Yeah. I'm sure I'll see you again. You're a very unique thing. Kind of a special thing for us to have here in Arizona, Maricopa. Yeah. You're in Pima too, or you're selling?
I'm in Pinal right now. I haven't done a lot in Pima, but I think we'll probably be moving in that direction.
Okay.
I'm like I said, I'm in Superior, which is in Pinal County right now. But I'm still working a lot in Phoenix.
Good. All right. Well, I appreciate you being here. Thanks for everyone for joining. If you like us, click like us on the and subscribe to the podcast, and we'll see you again next time. Thank you. Thank you for joining the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Click subscribe and like for ongoing insightful conversations. Explore our webpage for show notes and additional resources. Visit our guests' webpage for deeper insights. Your engagement is the foundation of our journey, and until next time, keep pursuing wisdom.